So the question that we were talking about was your childhood house like, and you said you'd lived in Arizona, Utah, Washington, Utah, Arizona. I mean, it was like a lot.
Texas.
Texas too. But the one you remember the most was a two-story. Tell us about that one.
Um, the home that I remember the most and probably was the happiest was in Washington State. And I was probably 9 years old when we moved there.
Yeah.
And Dad bought a home again with property.
Yeah.
And the home was it was big to me as a child, but as I look at a picture of it now, because I went back, it's not as big as I imagined it was.
And you saw it?
In
You went back
Washington,
and saw it?
when we moved to Washington.
But you went back and saw it later on in life?
Yeah.
Like recently, or when was it?
Yeah, we took a trip with Mother, and visited Washington again and saw
And it
the
was
place.
still there? That's cool.
But it had a porch and it had 2 stories. It had probably 3 bedrooms upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
And my sister and I shared the bedroom because we never had enough furniture to have our own room.
Right.
So my sister and I are just a year apart,
Mm-hmm.
but we're quite different in personalities, and so, but we shared this. We slept together and shared the same bed all of our life.
Oh, really? Cool.
And in Washington, it wasn't heated up, and so we would take a bottle of a quart jar with really hot water in it to kind of warm up the bed. I don't know why we didn't break the water sometime, but we didn't.
That's awesome.
But it was Washington, in the middle of the state, kind of.
Okay.
So it wasn't on the coast.
Right. Kind
And
of just high desert.
when we moved there, first thing Dad always started was the barn.
Mm.
And then he started fixing the house up enough for us to live in.
Right.
Mother worked part-time. I think she worked in the turkey business, canning turkey and stuff. And
Wow.
the 3 of us, rode the bus to school.
Mm.
And
Your sister.
Dad would plant crops, and I remember he planted asparagus one year.
Mm-hmm.
And so as it grew, we would cut early morning before we left on the bus. We would go out and cut asparagus.
Mm.
And so it was really interesting because you spear it below the ground with a little knife.
Yeah.
And then you lay it, when you get your hands full, you lay it on the rolls. And then Ronald, with a horse, had a long little board wagon that would come up and pick up the piles that we would do. And so it was
Wow.
our job to cut the asparagus before we went to school. And lots of times we would see the school bus and we would just run and catch the bus.
Right from the asparagus fields.
So we our hands smelled and were dirty and smelled like asparagus all day. But I liked the school, and the neighbors it was kind of a farm, so the neighbors weren't close.
Mm.
But they came down after we moved there and said their kids had grown out of their ice skates, so they gave us ice skates.
Mm.
And so we learned to ice skate because the water level in where we lived was high.
Mm.
So most of the farms had water ponds on them.
Mm.
And besides, they had canal systems where they irrigated their crops with.
Mm.
So we could ice skate on the canals
Oh, jeez.
to our friends' houses, and then get out, and the boys would play hockey, and
Mm-hmm.
they'd build a fire, and that was a fun
Oh, man.
experience of learning to ice skate.
Yeah.
And
So fun.
there was one experience we had. Dad worked nights. My father was a hardworking man,
Mm-hmm.
and he was honorable in that way that he bought houses that he probably couldn't afford He had a vision to make something of them, but they never came through because it always, he'd lose interest in it and quit before he got through, or maybe he just ran out of money. But he was an electrician.
Oh, okay.
That was his side job, is electric. After the oil mills that he worked with earlier,
Right.
in Washington. So that was a fun place. We had fruit trees, and Mother canned a lot, and she worked in the Mutual, and that was where my father cleaned up his life enough from smoking that we drove back to Utah, which was the closest temple, and were still to our parents.
Oh, really? Wow.
So I think
Wow.
an experience at work when my dad was a lineman,
Yeah.
that a man was electrocuted when he got in the hot wires, and it kind of humbled him enough to kind of realize death was easily taken, and so I'm sure the men at church helped him activate to be worthy enough to go to the temple. So I remember
Wow.
we went to the Manti Temple to be sealed
Wow.
because the Salt Lake Temple was closed for some reason. For cleaning, I guess, like they do all the temples, they close them.
Right.
But we didn't stay there long, and from Washington we moved to Gilbert.
Okay.
But I probably should tell you about the first house that Josh didn't record,
Oh, yeah.
is that when my father married, my mother and father married, Dad was about 9 years older than Mother. And so he was at the time working in the oil mills in Texas. And they were, at that time of the year, they were finding oil in the ground. And so he worked on crews that dug the oil. And when they got the oil dug and ready to use, they moved to another location. So Mother was moving all the time with us 3 little kids, and sometimes living with grandparents, sometimes living with uncles and aunts,
Right.
just wherever until the oil field was found, then we'd move again.
move
So I
again.
know we moved. In Mother's life story, I know we moved 5 or 6 times during those years.
Oh, wow.
And then it came time that I think the oil fields were not making as much, and Dad wasn't getting too successful in it, so they moved to Utah, to Stargo, which is by Morenci, which is, I think, a copper mine.
Oh, okay.
And so we moved there. My life was, I remember, that's the first time I remember living, the first memory I have as a child. And I think my older brother Ronald was very energetic boy, and he always was finding ways to make money.
Really?
And he decided he could raise rabbits. So I remember helping Ronald with rabbits.
Yeah.
And then I remember that Anita broke her arm, and Mother had to drive down the hill to Morenci to the doctor. So I remember those 2 little occasions in Morenci, but the rest of it I don't remember.
Right.
But we lived a lot with family. We lived with, the Lindsay family is a very close family, and so we lived with Mother's brothers and sisters different times in my life in Mesa.
Right.
As Dad was looking for other places to buy, he would leave us with, one time in Uncle James's house down and past Coolidge and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And Mother would, after we stayed there for a while, she would go get a job, and she worked in the melons, watermelons there.
Oh,
So
wow.
she was always working to help
Jeez.
finance our moves and our places. And
Right.
and so then we moved to Utah, and then we moved back to Arizona, and then we moved back to Utah. So in those 2 moves, we were in lots of different schools, and my education was not good. When I started first grade in Linden, the oil fields were that oil plant. What is it called?
Oh, Geneva?
Geneva Steel.
Yes, Geneva, yeah. Yeah.
I guess it's not oil, it was steel.
Still, yeah.
Dad got a job there while Mother was working the farm. We had Japanese people come and pick the tomatoes
Wow.
and the green beans. I remember
That's cool.
going out in the field with a salt shaker and just sitting and eating tomatoes. And Dad
cool.
had workhorses. We didn't have tractors then.
Yeah.
And then he had a dairy in Linden. And so he worked in Geneva Steel, and Mother worked the farm.
Wow.
And I started school with Anita as we walked up the hill to Linden School.
Yeah.
And there was so many children in the school because Geneva had opened that I think I had 45 in my first grade. And at the end of the year, the teacher said, I think we need to keep Pat in the first grade again because she's not reading.
Oh.
And Mother says, well, why are you telling me at the end of the school year? And I think she was just so overwhelmed with the work she did and trying to keep up that she depended on the school to teach me to read, and I wasn't getting it. So because of not getting a good start, I struggled with reading well, and I was very shy and embarrassed about it. So it was an emotional thing that I kind of played games with the teachers and different things to try to not look so bad when I couldn't read well.
Right. Oh.
And I think that affected my personality a little bit, but I think you find something that you excel in and it kind of builds you, and the only thing I found that I excelled in was sports. So I was asked to be on the higher grades baseball team because I could play and run and do well in sports. I remember playing jacks with the boys and jump rope and all the kids' games, and the boys loved marbles. And in fact, I missed the bus one day playing with marbles and got in trouble. So, but Washington was a good place, and then the next happiest place we moved was when we moved into Gilbert.
Okay.
Most of the houses we moved in were old and had to be fixed up, and we most of the time didn't have indoor plumbing. We had outside toilets.
Wow.
And when we moved to Gilbert for the first time, we moved out on Power Road, right over by Williamsfield Air Force Base. And at the time, it was active as a Air Force base. And so the jet planes were flying right over our house as they would leave the runways and come.
Right.
And then we had an outside toilet and no water in the house.
Oh, man.
So we bathed in the ditches. And Dad would carry, in the wintertime, we would carry water and Mother would heat it. Because if you don't have running water, you don't have a hot water heater.
Right.
So we would bathe in those galvanized bathe tubs in the winter.
Man.
And that was a rough year, and I think we would carry water from the ditch to wash clothes. And Mother had the old Ringer wash machines. So it was, but in all of that, my poor mother worked so hard all of her life in fixing up and trying to be active in the church, and she took a job working in Singers in Mesa. That was a long drive for her then, and we only had one car.
Yeah.
So Ronald and all of us that played sports after school, we had to walk home or find a ride.
Right.
And Ronald was the most troubled by it because he's football practice and all the practices are after school and after the bus runs. So he would have to run those 5 miles or so from Power Road to Gilbert Road
Wow.
back
Jeez.
after practice. So
Wow.
we only had the one car and then the pickup that Dad used to work.
Mm.
But we moved from that house to another house on Higley, out close to Green Creek.
Yeah.
And so Mother promised us kids that I was a freshman, Anita was a sophomore, and Ronald was a junior already in school.
Mm-hmm.
That she would not move us. We would be able to finish school there.
Mm.
So we all excelled in the Gilbert High School because it was small
Yeah.
and it was a farming community,
Mm-hmm.
and the church was strong.
Mm-hmm.
The church in Gilbert, and we had road shows and dance festivals and camping trips, and the scouting program was strong. So
Yeah.
we had good friends
Right.
that helped us, and it was so small you could do anything you wanted to do. You could be in the class play,
Yeah.
you could be in the band. I played the drums
Oh, cool.
and learned I didn't know how to read music.
Uh-huh.
So, you just know if it's a quarter note or a whole note.
Right.
And I moved from the bass drum to snare drums
Okay.
after practicing a little bit. So then we were in school plays, and we could play any sport we wanted because they were all open.
Right. That's
And
cool.
so we could be as active as, and then they always had queens and kings, and I think I was a queen once, and Fred was,
Oh, yeah.
so
yeah.
that's where I
Like
met
the dances.
Fred,
Yeah.
is in high school.
Okay. So
And
during
he was in Ronald's room. He was 2 years older than I am.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And so it was Ronald and Anita and I were all a year apart about.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing.
So that's a lot about that first house that we moved in.
That's fantastic.
What else do you want to ask me?
Allie's being super noisy. I have to shut Allie's door. She's like ruining her. Sheesh. Okay, just a second. I'll go get it.
What does she want?
She's just being really loud. I think it's creeping up the voice. Okay. All right.
So you really asked me about the first house, and I moved clear to Gilbert.
That's fantastic. One question that I like too is, do you have any, sweet childhood memories surrounding a holiday? Like, what was your favorite holiday growing up, and also about work? Because it sounds like you worked really hard. Like you were chopping asparagus how old were you then?
Well, I was probably in the 7th grade, so I was older.
What, did your mom teach you to work, or how did you learn to work hard?
Mother and Dad, Mother canned a lot of, everywhere we went, she was a canner.
Yeah.
She was raised during the Depression, and so she canned and learned to can and process food, and we all raised our own chickens, and we learned how to process them.
Right.
And I can remember them killing the animals on our property, and it's kind of gruesome to watch a pig hanging from the rope on the tree while they're processing it. So I've
Yeah.
been around. Mother always fussed at me because she would say, "You need to move your hands faster.
Oh, really?
You can get more done." But
Yeah.
I learned to properly cut up a chicken
Wow.
and pick
Yeah.
the feathers off of it, and so we worked helping with
Just
the
around the
canning
house.
processes
Yeah.
and stuff.
And it sounds like it wasn't, when your help is needed like that, it's not really an option. You can't say, "Mom, I don't want to," or whatever,
Yeah.
because you have to help take care of the family almost.
Well, I was the youngest in the family, so my father seems like he was working the night shift a lot because he could then get the day work done a little bit too.
Right.
So we really had the most fun when Dad was working.
Oh,
because
right.
we didn't have television then, and we would listen to the radio, and the radio is what we found the mysteries,
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
the Shadow Knows
Mm-hmm.
and the mysteries of the funny shows, the comedy shows,
Yeah,
and the series that would come on. They'd do a chapter every night or something,
that's
and
fun. Yeah.
so we did that. But lots of times we just visited and cut up as a family and told jokes and before bed,
Mm.
and then we would go upstairs and go to bed. One time, Mother was always involved in mutual, and so she would have corn festival, and when the corn came on,
Yeah,
when the apricots came on, I would go climb the tree and just fill myself with apricots.
I love apricots.
I had a normal childhood of the games that kids play,
Yeah.
hide and seek.
Right.
We used to play hide and all the children's games that kids don't play that much anymore.
Right.
Kick the can.
Oh, I love
And
that
when
one.
I get
That was so
older,
fun.
it was, and you had kind of a crush on a boy or something, you would try to find where he was hiding so you could hide with him. Nothing really happened, but it was just a fun game that you played.
Yeah. Sardines.
So
Is
kids,
that the one?
what?
Sardines.
Sardines?
Is that the one where you go hide with the person who's hiding? Is that what you're
No,
talking about?
I don't know. It wasn't called that.
Oh, okay.
But we played all the childhood games, and we had a good, trick or treating. We lived in the country, so it was a nightly thing that we did.
Yeah.
Our Christmases were never special because we each got one gift. That was what we got for Christmas.
Right.
And lots of times, Aunt Lois in Texas, which is, most of my kids know her
Mm-hmm.
because she lived with Mother later.
Yeah.
She never had children, but she always sent us a Christmas present in the mail.
All right.
It wasn't, as I look back on it, it was nothing big.
Right.
It was something simple, but it was a gift that came in the mail, and it was so exciting.
Mm.
And Mother would usually let us open that the night before.
Oh, fun.
But after we learned to ice skate, one Christmas they bought us all a new pair of ice skates.
Oh, that's fun.
So that's one gift. I don't remember any special gifts that I bought that was really meaningful,
Right.
but it was a happy time because it was Christmas.
Right. So we kind of jumped to you meeting Fred. Do you want to tell us about your courtship?
Well, because Gilbert was so small, each class held our classes were 30 was a big class.
Right.
I think there was 28 in mine.
Wow.
So we knew the freshmen, seniors, juniors, and
Yeah.
we knew the stats about everybody, how good they were, whatever, because,
Right.
when we go to games, because the school was small and not because I had a great ability, I was able to play a lot of sports, and
Right.
we got a new a young PE teacher in that joined us with the women's leagues, so we could compete against other schools our size, and
Right.
that was fun
That is
because
cool.
we never got to do that before when we would go play another team somewhere.
Yeah.
And she was really good, and she kept wanting me to go to school and be a PE teacher.
Oh.
She didn't know that I wasn't smart enough to do that, but
Yes, you are.
but she kept after me to do that, and so I came. You kind of feel like you're their favorite.
Yeah, that's cool.
But at the end of the year, after I met Fred and I wasn't going to school, I didn't get the senior best athlete of the year. It went to somebody else.
Oh, seriously?
I was heartbroken.
Holy cow.
I thought I was her favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know how you think something like that.
Right. Jeez.
And it was given to one of my other friends that was a member of the church. But I thought, that's not fair. I have worked hard for you all these years, played every sport. We went bowling, we played with bows and arrows.
Oh, wow.
We played table tennis, we played
Oh, jeez.
with
Just did everything.
basketball, girls basketball. She brought every sport there was to the
Wow. school,
and we enjoyed them all. In fact, I liked it so well I had 2 PE classes
Oh, really?
because I didn't take any of the hard classes like algebra.
Right.
I could,
That's fantastic.
anyway,
So you
so
knew.
Gilbert was a joyful school, but I met Fred
Yeah.
because I started being a cheerleader, and I was the cheerleader for 4 years.
Wow.
All the time I was there from freshman on.
Mm-hmm.
And my best friend Leola Lamb's father owned a dairy, and we were best friends.
Mm.
So we were cheerleading together until my junior year. Her brother put a skunk in the school, and they made him not come to school anymore for that year.
Oh,
So
wow.
her dad took them all to Mesa School. So one year, my junior year, I was so sad my best friend was not there.
Oh, that is sad. Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Sheesh.
So I met Fred, and he played football, and our school was so small, we only played 6-man football.
Oh,
Have you
cool.
heard of that?
No. Quarterback, and then.
There was
Mostly
only
like-
6 people on it instead of 12.
Sheesh, that's
Or
cool.
is it 11?
I think it's 11. Yeah.
I don't remember. So anyway, he played, and
Was it any good
we
by
had
the
the same dances that all the schools have, the kind that the girls ask the boys and the boys ask them.
Right.
And so I don't remember why he thought that I liked him, but he said, I think that Pat is cheering louder for you than other boys, his friends told him. So it came time for Fred to go to the prom. He was a senior,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was a sophomore. And you don't ask a sophomore to go to the junior senior prom
Right.
because they're too young.
Uh,
But they didn't have the church didn't have the dating thing then either. I think I was dating when I was 14.
oh, really?
So I've been
Right.
on a few dates, but anyway, we had this 2-story high school in Gilbert, and I was walking to English class with my friends, and we were cutting up and laughing and talking, and I saw Fred standing there, but I just thought he was standing there. I just walked by him,
Right.
and the kid says, Pat, I think Fred called your name. And I said, I was already past him almost to the door of the school, and I turned around and said, did you want me? And he says, oh, I wondered if you would go to the prom with me.
Oh, jeez.
And he was so shy.
Yeah.
And of course I was excited. When does a senior ask you to the junior prom? And
Right.
I knew of him, but I didn't know a lot about him.
Yeah.
I knew who he ran with. I knew he played football with my brother. I
Right.
mean, we knew everybody in the school.
Right.
And he ran with a group of 3 boys, and we would see him all the time at the root beer place or you know how high school is.
Right.
It's crazy,
Right.
isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, that sounds fun though. Sheesh.
So, we would always go to the root beer place in Mesa,
Yeah.
and there was a few hangouts. We had a lover's lane that we would drive by to see who's in the lover's lane, and usually honk at them and make fun of them. And
Right.
so it was
That's fun.
a country school.
Yep.
We weren't part of Mesa, and we weren't big enough to play Mesa.
Oh, gotcha.
So we played the little schools around.
Yep.
We were on the levels. So
My goodness.
So we went, our first date was at the junior prom, and Mother didn't have any money, and Dad was farming,
Yeah.
and at the time he quit being a dairy farmer, he started being a cotton farmer. And so she borrowed a dress for me from my Aunt Frankie.
Oh wow.
It's a pretty ugly dress.
It's a pretty.
But Fred says he thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. Oh,
So
that's sweet.
I guess he got smitten with me because he asked me out again.
Oh, good. Like the same night?
No,
Okay.
he came. We didn't double with anybody. We just in Gilbert they rent a motel, not a motel, eating place in Mesa, because Gilbert was small. It didn't have anything in it.
Right.
But a few bars downtown and a 5 and 10 store and a few
Right.
grocery stores.
Right.
And so everything was in Mesa or Phoenix. And it was big time if you went to Phoenix.
Right.
Because that
It's
was
the big city.
Yeah, it was a big city. So we went to Mesa to dinner, and then they had a dance in the ballroom there, and it was a sit-down dinner.
Nice.
And
So
then,
you didn't really have a group; it was just you and Fred. that
well,
first
yeah,
time.
it was just Fred and I, because we didn't double with anybody, and he just took me to the dinner, and we ate and danced, and then he took me home.
Wow. Cool.
So it wasn't.
That's nice though. Simple, beautiful.
And so this was kind of towards the end of the year, and then they had graduation and the things that have, the junior, senior prom.
Right.
And the next date we went to the lake with his friends.
Okay.
But in those days, we rode in the back of pickups all the time.
Right.
Everybody rode in the back of pickups, and
Uh-huh.
no one wore seatbelts ever.
I love it.
So we went to the lake, and I don't know why we went, and I don't remember what we did when we maybe throw rocks, and we didn't swim or anything, so I don't remember
Right.
the details.
Would that have been the lakes up here at like
Yeah, that was just like woods.
Bulldog Canyon? Is that what it's called?
No,
Or all the way over by Apache Junction, those ones?
yeah, that's the one up by there.
Oh, yeah.
Canyon. It's called Canyon
Canyon,
Lake.
that's right, yeah. Mhm.
And Fred liked to hunt and fish a lot. I found out that he and when we were in our dating years after he graduated, he worked as a welder
Mhm.
for a man of our church. His name was Brother Fuller, and he was the father of one of my friends.
Mm.
So he worked for him, and as we became more serious, and we, because we dated for 2 years until I graduated,
Right.
and we broke up one time because I told him I couldn't marry him because I had to get married in the temple.
Oh, really? And he's not a member of the church. That's some super interesting
He
part of the
wasn't.
story.
He wasn't a member, and
Yeah.
so he at that time we were serious enough. He gave me his class ring,
Wow. Yeah.
and so he would take me to all the school things that I was still involved in,
Right.
because I was still a cheerleader. I was still totally involved in school,
Yeah, right.
and and the kids would say, "Fred's parked out front in his car waiting for you," or whatever, when
Right.
he wasn't working. And he went to ASU,
Oh,
to
okay.
college,
Cool.
and worked as a welder.
Yeah.
And he worked really hard as welding.
Mhm.
It was a country welder that they fixed everything for the farmers,
Yeah, I'll bet.
He would take him places and fix
Yeah.
that and fix this.
Yeah.
So he went to college, and I finished high school, and I was in the plays, and I was cheerleading all the games, and
Mhm.
and sometimes he would drive me to the game, but mostly I would ride the bus or
Okay.
the band.
Yep.
Well, but I was.
Were you just having like for those 2 years in school? You weren't thinking I'm going to marry this guy. It was just I kind of like him.
Well,
Let's stay.
it was just kind of, we were going steady. You know,
Yeah.
called steady dates, and so everybody knew. And then in the yearbooks, everyone talks about marriage because in those days, a lot of people didn't talk about school. I mean, college
Right.
or even missions. Boys weren't encouraged to go on missions.
Mm.
They were,
Right.
I guess they were encouraged, but not many of them. It wasn't
They didn't
it
really
wasn't
do
a
it
big
often.
deal anymore.
Right.
And we didn't even have missionaries assigned to our wards like they do now.
Right.
And they weren't around. Did
Yeah.
you have missionaries when you were growing up?
I only remember in our stake having them a couple times. Like never
So,
really knew. Yeah.
You know, like now they're assigned to everything. So when Fred consented to take the lessons, we were going to Queen Creeks.
Oh,
We had
really?
moved again,
Missionaries out there. Yeah.
and the road we lived on, this side was Gilbert and this side was Queen Creek.
Oh, really?
So we lived on this side.
Uh huh.
And so you have to go to the church where you're assigned.
Oh, gotcha.
So we went to Queen Creek Ward,
Wow.
even though we went to road shows and played in Gilbert Ward,
Yes.
in downtown Gilbert.
Right.
But we had a really sweet bishop, and his name was Bishop John Freestone, and he gave Fred the lessons.
Oh, really? Cool.
Because
Because there really weren't missionaries.
They didn't have missionaries in the ward.
That's cool. So the bishop did it, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And do you remember if you asked Fred to take the lessons or how that worked out?
Well, after we broke up,
Yeah.
and I gave him back his class ring.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in Higley then. And he was really upset with me, and he threw the ring out in the cotton field
Oh, darn.
that he had worked so hard for.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he worked hard welding and going to school, and their family was poor too, you know, like
Yeah.
everybody. And so I felt really bad. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it because
Oh,
you know, you can
shoot.
toss a ring a long ways.
That's right.
And
Oh.
I looked in the direction and thinking, where would it land?
Oh, yeah.
And I never found it. But anyway, we broke up, and so I started kind of feeling bad that I'd put so much pressure on him, because he was a nicer boy than a lot of the members of the church boys were. I mean, he never
Right.
spoke bad language.
Yeah.
He didn't drink and smoke and do like the Mormon boys that we here would do.
Yeah.
And
Right. Yeah.
So I started feeling bad, and I thought, well, I better write him a letter and apologize and see if we can work something out. So I wrote him a letter.
Yeah.
It was a crazy letter.
Do you have it? Do you remember?
I had it, but just recently I threw it away. I thought,
Oh, did you really?
I don't want the kids to read how stupid I was. Fred, I really miss you. Sorry I said what I did. It was kind of like juvenile
Like a-
writing.
Yeah, right.
I was embarrassed to read it to even myself because it says, I know you probably will find someone else, and you know how you go on and
Right.
say these stupid things. And I'm surprised his mother gave it to him, because his mother was very anti-Mormon.
Right.
And so I'm sure she saw that it was from Pat Clare, and guess where he went? Hunting.
Oh, did he?
He left and went hunting
Wow.
after I broke up with him, and so he was gone.
Yeah.
And for the whole week, I was wondering where he was, and his car wasn't parked out in the front of Gilbert.
That is sweet. He
And
just had
so
to go to the mountains.
after a week went by, the kids started saying, Pat, Fred's car's back again. It's parked out by the boys' school.
Oh, yeah.
So then I thought, oh, he's got my letter.
I
So
love
we talked, and I decided that I was a little rough on him
Yeah.
because he doesn't understand. And I said, I'll go to your church, and then you come to my church, and we'll work it out.
Yeah. That's cool.
I was willing to compromise.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I went to his church one time and it was so weird. And he kept coming with me because
Right.
I didn't keep going with him.
Right.
Because they don't believe in organ music and stuff. They're
Oh, really somber.
the true church is not true in the Church of Christ.
Mm.
So he's kept going with me, and finally he consented to take the lessons.
Mm.
He was still living at home, going to school, and working at the welding shop.
Mm.
And he had so much anti-Mormon literature in him
Right.
that it was really hard for him to accept Joseph Smith.
Mm.
But he said he learned on the plan of salvation about where we are,
Right.
why we are here, and where we're going.
Yeah.
The plan of salvation that the Lord gave us
That's
that
what
really converted him.
Mm.
And he said that he could not join for me, but he would join the church. So when he, I guess he told his parents were really, really upset because
Mm. Yeah.
Fred's the oldest and the favored child to the family.
Mm. Right.
And so they invited a Baptist minister to their church, to their home.
Right.
And he talked to him about all the things that we do in the temples, and he showed him the temple clothes and how
Oh, my
weird they were. And
Wow.
he said we did immoral things in the temples. And
Wow.
so Fred listened to that, but he still had a baptismal date, and he got baptized in. And before that, he decided that his parents were so brokenhearted, and his mother is such a good mother.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to love Garnet
Yeah.
because of the kind of a character and personality she has. But
Right.
so I understand how brokenhearted they were. But he got an apartment in Mesa,
Mm-hmm.
and he was working and living alone in an apartment. And by then I was close to graduating from high school.
Right.
So my father moved again, and he moved up past Globe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had no place to live after
Right.
high school.
Right.
I had to either go up to Globe with him, or so I went to live with my Aunt Lita in Mesa.
Okay.
And she was living with Uncle Joe's barber place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was living with them, and he was living in an apartment, and he had a baptism date, and I said, it's time to get married. Because we'd been dating for 2 years.
Right. Right.
So I consented, we talked about it, and we decided we'd get married in September.
Okay.
So I graduated in May.
Mm-hmm.
I got a job in the 5 and 10 cent store downtown in Gilbert,
Yep.
and he was still working and going to school.
Mm.
And so he got married, he got baptized, and
Yeah.
then we got married on September the 24th. And the bishop in Gilbert Ward married us.
And did they make you wait for a year to go to the temple?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So by then we'd had Freddie.
Okay.
By then we had moved, we lived in a little apartment by the temple in Mesa.
Yeah.
He found a little apartment, and we went on our honeymoon to Utah.
Right.
And first time he'd ever been to Utah.
Mm.
And we stayed we went to Grand Canyon.
On the way up there.
We
Yeah.
camped out at Oak Creek.
Oak Creek.
Well, that's on the way
Is that
to
Sedona?
Sedona.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then he had a car, but it got hot on the way to Utah, so he got some gum and put it over something, and we made it.
Kept going.
But
Yeah.
by the time we got to Utah, we stayed with Mother's dad that lived there.
Okay.
Because Mother had lost her mother before I was born, and Grandpa Pleasant and Lita and Murray were still part of Mother's family, and they stayed with us a lot. Wherever we moved, Grandpa Pleasant was with us, and Lita.
Oh,
So
really?
Lita,
Wow.
if you remember Lita, I was really close to her because she was like a sister.
Right.
And then my father's father lost his wife before I was born, and he never remarried, and so he lived with us a lot. So we had grandpas
Wow.
in and out of our life,
Right.
every place we lived.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a burden for Mother sometimes when Grandpa Knight came because he needed more care, and she was always busy working.
Mm.
She worked hard all of her life.
Would so where in Utah did you end up on your honeymoon? 'Cause you took some great stops. It was Grand Canyon, Sedona, Grand Canyon.
And we stayed in
up
Pleasant
to-
Grove because Grandpa Pleasant, Mother's dad, had married a woman that had lost her husband. He came to Linden to help us build our house. Remember I told
Yeah,
you
yeah.
and the barn?
Mm-hmm.
And while he was there, he met Venus, was her name.
Okay.
And he married her. And she had a little home of her own and bees and apples. And I felt so close to him because he was in our house so much
Right.
that Fred and I stayed there. We didn't.
Oh, cool.
We didn't. The only place we stayed out in is at Grand Canyon.
Okay. Yes.
So I told your dad when he takes Janie, he has to stay in that same Grand Canyon Lodge and swim in the pool.
Yeah. Grand Canyon Lodge. That's cool. That's way cool.
So that was the only place we stayed.
Yeah. And you came back to your apartment in
We
Mesa.
came back to our apartment, and then Fred needed a new job because welding was just not paying well. So he applied at Southwest Gas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was really APS. It's Electrical and Gas Department.
Oh, okay.
And Ronald had gotten a job at Salt River Project, which is another electrical department.
Mm-hmm.
But Shirley's uncle worked in the gas department, and so she talked to her uncle, and he was influential in helping Fred get a job. Because you just sometimes can't just apply and go to work.
Yeah. You got it.
So as soon as he started his work, as he worked from digging ditches for lines
Wow.
for the electrical to go in, and he worked his way up in the company gradually. But so in those days, you lived where you worked.
Right.
The freeways weren't built then,
Mm-hmm.
and so we moved to South Phoenix, and we got our first apartment. That Mother gave us a bed for a wedding present, and it was all she gave us was a mattress.
Oh.
So we threw it on the floor.
Right.
That was our bed.
Right.
And I think Garnet came to see us, and we didn't have a refrigerator, so she bought us a refrigerator, and
Oh,
someone
jeez.
gave us a couch.
Yeah.
So we had bare minimums when we started.
Oh.
We had a bed to sleep on, a couch to sit on, and a refrigerator.
Yeah.
That was living.
That was it. I love it. In South Phoenix, man.
And so we lived in, that's where Fred started. Well, he first started his service when we moved in, first married into a little apartment by the temple. And the bishop had him passing the sacrament with the deacons.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was a humbling experience, but he learned that that was part of the church service.
Right.
Then when we moved to South Phoenix, our first job was with Scouts. And he was a scoutmaster and then worked up. And so we both started our church service there. I was a primary teacher and he was a scoutmaster,
Scoutmaster. Wow.
working with those rough boys. But it was right along his line because he loves fishing.
Yeah.
And so he would take them up to the fishing, and you know, it was part of his.
Right. Camping and fishing. That's cool.
Have you got those girls asleep already, girl?
They're living the dream in there right now.
They're awake.
They have their popcorn, their waters, their stuffed animals, their blinkies.
Wowzers.
And they're just like this.